going to. Well, hello and welcome to Staying Safe Online, another GFWC Impact Talk with Impact. Tonight we have Jen Rous with us. Jen has over 30 years of experience in technology as both a technologist and a business leader, and she does such a fabulous job of breaking very technologically complex ideas into manageable, actually speak that the general public can understand. So she is going to be such a great speaker for us this evening. A little bit of her background. Jen earned a BS in Computer Information Systems from Roanoke College in Salem, Virginia, and an MBA and an MSc in Information Technology, both from Johns Hopkins University's Carey School of Business in Baltimore. She, again, has worked in numerous industries, government agencies, banks, nonprofits, with tech entrepreneurs. She is very, very committed to mentoring people and developing their technology interests and careers, specifically young women, which is exciting. She has been a mentor in many capacities. And when she was the CIO of a big law firm in Baltimore, she was recognized by Smart CEO magazine in 2009 as one of the top 10 CIOs of the year. And in 2013, she was recognized with an Executive Management Award. She's also participated in Baltimore Mayor's Smarter City Task Force and the Mayor's Women Leading Baltimore, a mentoring experience. So Jen has just a ton to offer. Currently, she is running her own technology consulting company called Rous Consulting, and she is a network partner with Teal Concepts and operates as our COO of that entity. And to beat all, she is the mom of two wonderful little puppies who are very excitable and aggressive, and a wonderful cat, and is a passionate grape farmer. So Jen has so much to offer us, and you'll see on the screen her LinkedIn profile. You can find her at Jen Rous, and she does love to have you connect with her if you'd like to. So with that said, I know that you are going to learn a ton from Jen. Please, again, ask any questions along the way, but I know her conversation with us this evening will be engaging and you will learn a bunch. So Jen, please take it away and tell us how to stay safe online.
Thanks, Kitty. I appreciate that. Hello, everybody. This is going to start off sounding a little bit lecture-y, and I don't mean for it to be. I'm going to kind of roll through some information sort of quickly and then have an opportunity to answer any questions that you might have. The truth about cybersecurity is that I think, there's no denying, it is the reality of today's world. There are some very sophisticated bad actors out there, but there are also a lot of resources available to those who just want to dabble. So you can be a really good hacker, or you can be just a high school kid or somebody with some extra time and a computer on their hands and really cause some damage and some drama, regardless of where your focus is. So there are some key tenets of information security that I wanted to talk with you about on the next slide. And really there's 5 things that I wanted to mention. One is taking stock, making sure you understand what you have, how you get it, why you need it, where you keep it, who has or should have access to it, and how you dispose of it. And this is both true in a digital world as well as a physical world. So not just the paper, that you have in your hand, but also your digital files. It's important to think through all of those concepts when you're trying to plan out your approach to information security, because it's really an exercise in risk management. It is all it is. How much risk are you willing to take, and how much information are you willing to expose or lose in the end as a result? So the second thing is to really be smart about what you need, and keep only what you need for as long as you think you need it. Most personal records are 7 years, for things like taxes and other, official records. that the exception are things like licenses or mortgage documents or deeds or things that are, they're lifetime commitments. But if you think about things in terms of 7 years, for most things that would apply. The third is to lock it up. Once you understand what you have and where it is and why you need it and why you're keeping it, you need to have a strategy for both the physical and the electronic security of that information. The fourth is really about cleanliness of your data and throwing out, what you don't need, destroying physical records with crosscut, for paper, physical destruction of media and digital wiping for data. There are a lot of tools out there that are available. We've actually recently partnered with an organization called Tech for Troops, which is doing a spectacular job of taking used equipment from companies and from individuals and actually doing a Department of Defense level certification on the wiping of that data to ensure that anybody's personal data that they may have had when they collected the device doesn't get exposed as they're repurposing those devices and that equipment. And then the last thing is really about planning ahead, and that's thinking about who might need access to this stuff if you're no longer available to provide that access yourself. And there are lots of different ways to go about doing that, depending on the circumstances of your life. But it's worthwhile to think about that before a situation arises where someone else really needs access and you're not able to provide it to anyone. So I wanted to talk a little bit about some common types of cyber attacks. And so the general category of malicious software, which is commonly referred to as malware, that's a term that describes any program or code that harmfully probes systems. And so there's lots of different types of malware that's out there, some of it disguising itself as warnings against malware, to be tricky. But you typically get malware when you're navigating to hacked or dummy websites, downloading infected files, or opening emails from a device that lacks anti-malware or antivirus technology and security components. These are typically targeted towards both individuals and businesses, and so it's important as an individual to be aware that messages, you are a target for some hacker, whether you think you are or not. And so most of the game for many of these attacks is just a wide blanket, to send to as many email addresses as you, or text, or phone numbers as you possibly can, and just see what you catch. Unfortunately, it works, and it's actually really effective, and that's why people continue to do it. One of the most popular, pieces of malware is the concept of phishing. Phishing scams are very common ways that hackers send fraudulent emails that appear to be from a reputable company or from someone you know. The goal, of course, is to get you to click that link or download that attachment, and then they siphon off your data and return it back to them so that they can use it in other ways. Again, a very common, target for individuals and businesses. I want to mention ransomware because it's often delivered via phishing. So ransomware is a piece of software or code that, when it's downloaded and executed on a machine, it gains access to and then locks down access to vital data. And the only way that you can get access to that data is to pay the ransom, which is typically in the form of cryptocurrency, which I won't get into, but I'm happy to talk about if you'd like. The most recent example of a ransomware delivery is the Colonial Pipeline, issue earlier this month, and it can be really crippling, as we can see, and have long-term effects. Ironically, most ransomware is often deployed as an avenue to get money. It's not, necessarily a politically driven or another type of attack. It's mostly, and as it was in the case of the Colonial Pipeline issue, an attempt to extort money from the target. So I wanted to show you a really good phishing example. This was actually received recently, and as you can see, it really looks good. it used to be easy to find the phishing examples because they didn't use good grammar, or they had words misspelled. But now you really have to be a little bit sophisticated about how you're looking at things. And two things that I always recommend are looking at that address line up at the top, where it says no reply at alerts@xfinity.com, but then it says reply not to ariawoods.com. And that's not right, And so if you see something like that, a mismatch in those addresses, then that's a clue that this is not something that you want to click on. The other interesting thing about this one is that when you hover over that button, that update now button in the email itself, and by hover I mean, so when you see that little hand that looks like this, you put your mouse over it and it makes that little hand instead of the pointer. That is actually showing you a different address than you would expect. So there's nothing in there about Xfinity, and that is another signal that this is a problem. So people like your companies or organizations like your bank or your credit card or your insurance company, they will not typically ask for personal details through an email or a text. You can always go directly to the provider's website to check any status and update your information if you think that maybe this is a problem. So in this case, this one was identified as a phish, but you could still go to Xfinity if you, of course, this one was particularly successful because the recipient was an Xfinity user. You can always go to that company's account and check to see if there's something happening there that is out of the ordinary. So I also wanted to bring up a couple of common scenarios and some tips for troubleshooting, as you're moving through space. I present to you a couple of sorry, that's one of my rambunctious dogs. A couple of different scenarios here. The first being, what might be happening if your computer is really slow, or if you get a lot of pop-up messages, or if it appears to send emails that you didn't write, which is a thing called spoofing. And it could be, potentially any of these things, but the most likely culprit is malware. And, so the general guidance is to beware of most things that are free. There's often, bad things embedded in free software, whether it's, for advertising purposes or for actual, damaging malware purposes. That said, there is a free software that I actually use called Malwarebytes. That is a tool that you can use to scan for malware if your computer is acting kind of funny or not behaving as it should. Another scenario that you might encounter is, how often should you restart your computer or your mobile device? And the truth is, all three of these are acceptable. Daily is great. I would restart at least weekly, and certainly whenever it acts a little wonky. It's a good idea to restart computers. They are just, thousands and thousands and hundreds of thousands of lines of code. And sometimes they get a little discombobulated, and a simple restart can often save you from, throwing it out the window when it starts to behave badly. Another scenario about types of free softwares that could include, viruses. One of the biggest culprits are electronic games. And I don't mean that, but, by, legitimate gaming companies, but some of those games that you might see in social media actions like Facebook quizzes, or, the ones that say, what are the 10 concerts you most remember, or list your first 5 cars that you owned. Those things are actually malware that is looking for personal information that you might share, because this personal information might also be part of the security questions that are asked for things like your bank or your insurance company, and they're looking to amass that level of detail so that they could either guess your passwords or potentially steal identity. Another place where that pops up is in generators, or games that are on social media platforms, like which Harry Potter category or character are you, things like that. I mean, they seem fun and benign, but I would definitely advocate for not clicking there if you can help it. Another thing to note about Facebook in particular is that there are a lot of troll accounts. out on Facebook. And so it's important to only accept friend requests from people that you know in real life, and to be on the lookout for repetitive friend requests, which are commonly a sign of a compromised account. So if you're friends with someone and you get another friend request from them, it's probably something that's not, quite on the mark. This is an example of a Facebook game, which I actually saw in my Facebook feed that one of my friends, who I will call up and say, stop doing this, actually clicked on this thing. And it's kind of cute and funny, but again, it's it's a potential way to open a door to malware, which is really something that you're trying to avoid. So a couple of words about passwords and what do you do with passwords. And I know that this is difficult for people because everything needs a password today and it's really hard to keep track of everything. So, you could, do any of these things, and I'll step through them, sort of one by one here. Because if you're not in a business environment, I actually don't have a problem with you writing them on a Post-it and keeping it near your computer. And the reason why is because some bad actor would actually have to break into your house in order to access that list. And so it's likely an acceptable risk, that the same person who's maybe trolling for me online, coming from, some of the, the sort of the famous, cybersecurity risk areas of the world, like Russia or China, they're probably also not breaking into my house to see this little list of things that I have on my piece of paper. In a business environment, I would not advocate the same thing because that's a different setup. I do not advocate for using the same password for everything, but I do like the idea of using a passphrase or something like that, or a base password. And what I mean by that is you can think of, a line of poetry that you like, or a song lyric that you like, and you can piece together a couple of, sort of base words or base characters, and then add a little appendage for individual websites. And that'll give you a better chance of actually remembering the base password and whatever your strategy is for that appendage. There are things like password managers, which I think are good investments for many people, especially if you have a lot of different passwords. They create very complex passwords. They're really, really difficult to guess, and they save them in a manager application. And there are a bunch that are available. 1Password, LastPass, Keeper are all fine, but it's important to understand that none of them are 100% secure. Just because you're using this password manager application, it doesn't mean that you'll never get hacked. Some of the biggest hacks ever were against some of these password management companies, because obviously they're a rich target, for anybody who is a bad actor out there in the world to get a hold of lots of people's passwords. And I don't, in terms of saving passwords to browsers, I don't think it's a problem to save, the password to, assuming you're not using the same password for everything. It's not a bad idea to use a password for, some of your less, serious, applications, or sensitive applications. But I certainly wouldn't save passwords for your bank or your healthcare provider or anything that really is capable of exposing a lot of data that is very personal to you. I do recommend using two-factor authentication, which is, two factors. It's something that you know and something that you have, typically. And so the something that you know is a password, and the something that you have is often a token when you're talking about traditional two-factor authentication. And that token can come in the form of a text message, where companies now will text you a number, and then you input the number to. That's a very good thing to implement. It is a little bit of a hassle in terms of ease of login, but it's really worth it for some of those more sensitive applications. The next thing, are biometrics. And biometrics are very good. That's also, in the multi-factor authentication space. It can be a three-factor thing, something your password, something you have, a token, something you are, a retinal scan or a face print or something like that. The difficulty in this space at an individual level is that there are some serious limitations in phone-based biometrics. And so the fingerprint that you're scanning on your phone, is not as good as, a fingerprint that the FBI would take from you and use as a biometric for access to things. So something to keep in mind as you're, as you're trying to get control of your password sphere. Another really important thing to do is to keep your systems updated. That's a really important maintenance activity. It encompasses all things technology, computers, both the hardware and the operating system. There's often updates to each and independently. Applications like Microsoft Office or Google or different browsers like Chrome or Firefox, they're all constantly now putting out revisions on a pretty brisk schedule. Microsoft, as an example, puts out a pretty big revision every month. Apple does a similar thing. Phones and tablets are the same concept. Wearables like a watch or any other kind of headphones. Sometimes headphones need updates depending on how sophisticated they are. So you don't necessarily want to be the first one to the party here, because sometimes they release bugs in that update, but you do want to make sure that you're not getting too far behind the updates as they're coming out for your devices and for your equipment. I'll say just a word about IoT, which is the Internet of Things. And that is really about technology expanding into other electronic devices and areas of electronic devices, like your refrigerator or your faucet. They're getting smarter with this technology wrapped around them that allows them to join your home network and then have access to the internet in order to do really cool stuff like order your groceries or fill up your dog's bowl, using a service like Alexa or Siri or Google. But what they don't typically have are really strong security protocols and safeguards that would prevent them from being the low-hanging fruit as a point of entry to your system. And so some of the most successful hacks, in business, in the business world, have actually come from downstream providers to that business. And so they weren't able to hack, the big bank. And so they hacked the HVAC provider, which had a lot less security going on and a lot less protocols and protections, and then weaved their way, back into their real target, which was the bank. So just things to be considerate about and think about. You don't want to unknowingly unlock a door, for a bad actor to open and burrow through. But again, it's a conversation of risk analysis and, how much risk are you willing to bear? And so then lastly, I just wanted to talk a little bit about how do you talk to tech people? I know it's hard to talk to us, and, I feel pretty strongly that everyone should work a help desk at some point in their lives, because it is a kind of an eye-opening experience. And I've worked a help desk for several years myself. And I can tell you, that the more details that you can provide to someone who needs to provide you with some help is really, really outstanding. The more you can say, here's when it happened, here's exactly what happened, here's what I was trying to do, here's what happened when I try to do it the next time, all of those things are really helpful. And will make a big difference in your experience, as will, a level of patience and a sense of humor, about things as people are really trying to help, and, they want you to have a good experience and to get your problems resolved as quickly as possible. So these are just a few things that I thought might be helpful reminders during, the time that we're in today, where there's so much noise and confusion about, what's safe to do online and what's not. We all have to take our chances with some of those things, but hopefully this will help you have some thoughtful, approaches to how you're encountering your own cybersecurity. So Kitty, that's all I had on my agenda to review. I'm happy to answer any questions about anything that I talked about here today, or any other related or not related questions that people may have.
Great. Well, I invite the group that we have, if you want to unmute, if you would like to type a chat in, or if you'd like to jump on your video and chat with Jen with your questions, that would be fantastic. She's got a lot of practical knowledge to share.
That was great, Jen. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you.
Trying to unmute, but I'm not sure it's working.
You're unmuted. We can hear you.
Am I unmuted?
You are.
Jen, I went to a site today that actually Kitty referred me to, and to look at, something, and a connection, and I got the connection. And then the next thing that the site asked me was, can we we want to access your location. Do you want to allow this? Is that something you should do or not do?
It sort of depends, on, how comfortable you are with releasing that information and what the company intends to do about it. So on the plus side, there are a lot of newly developed and releasing laws that require companies to be very clear about why they're collecting this information from you and what they intend to do about it. And so many people will tell you that it's not really that problematic to release your location, except sometimes on phones or mobile devices where you might not want, that level of physical tracking to take place.
So they should tell you why they want to know your location, because they didn't say anything like that. They just said, we'd like to know your location.
Say no.
Well,
They know.
And a lot of times it's kind of like if you're shopping on Home Depot, for example, that's when I see it, and they want to connect you with your local store. So they'd like to know your location so they can connect you with your local store. Most of the time I say no, because I figure I can go search and figure it out myself. But it is a joy of technology.
It's also a springboard to advertising, right? And so if they know that you have, what zip code that you're in, they can start to target that advertising down. And that's when you start to see a lot of ads in browsers and things that are actually for things that are local to you. That means that somewhere along the line you disclosed where you were.
Okay, so be wary, in other words.
In that same vein, what happens when you get a message about cookies and you need to accept cookies?
Yes, so cookies are little pieces of code that companies want to place on your computer so that they can do some level of tracking of the kind of things that you're doing. And a lot of that, again, is related to marketing and advertising and how they can better target things in order to, get you to buy other things or to go to certain places and that sort of a thing. Cookies in and of themselves are not bad. They're not malware typically. They're not really, technologically negative, but they do have that influence over the kinds of things that you'll see. And again, you're seeing more of that. You have to accept our cookies if you want to continue on this site now because of some of these more advanced laws that have been released, notably in California and New York. But they're coming to everywhere, and it won't be long before there are federal level laws that cover that sort of thing.
Jennifer, I know that if you go to the GFWC website, gfwc.org, in order to even go around on their website, you have to accept the cookies.
Yes.
Isn't there a way you can remove those from your computer? When I first started this whole journey 30 years ago or 25 years ago in computers, you used to be able to get rid of the history and cookies that had, but what does one do that today?
Sure. So you can still do that through a lot of the browsers and things, but it's not as complete as you might think. It's a little bit of a misleading process, right? So you can sort of delete some things, but it doesn't necessarily mean it always goes away. And so when you delete the cookies and you delete your passwords, that sort of resets you to, kind of a fresh level. But sometimes there are little bits and pieces that are sort of stuck in there just the same. So that's also, a caution against saving passwords to things or, that sort of thing. And, like I said, cookies in and of themselves they're not bad. They're not dangerous, necessarily. They just plunk these little things down so that they can do some limited tracking on you. That doesn't mean that they're, tracking you all over the world and everything that you're doing. They're only tracking, like, well, when you clicked on this, the very next thing you clicked was this, or when you clicked on this, you spent, 4 seconds reading, this section of the page, and maybe that's a gauge of of interest, or maybe it's not.
So it's okay if you go to the gfwc.org website to say okay to the cookies. It helps you interact with that website. Is that part of what it is?
Correct. Yeah, that's why they're putting out there, to give you a more personalized experience, so that you can see things that, now again, it's things that the organization thinks are important to you, not necessarily that you might find important to you, but they're trying to help you by placing these little bits of breadcrumbs around to create a better, more personalized experience for you.
Is there, for those of us with just computers that we use for our day-to-day lives and not banking and not sensitive information, are there security systems that are reasonable in cost, not for a business, but for individuals, that you'd recommend?
Sure. If you're using a Windows computer, Microsoft has a pretty good built-in security platform that's perfectly fine for those kinds of everyday uses, and they call it Defender, and it's a very good solution for for an individual home PC. In the iOS space, there are kind of the usual suspects of like Trend Micro and a bunch of other applications that often have very low cost or even a free tool that you can install, and the free tools in those spaces are generally okay, because they're not, you could trace them back to their originator, so they're not going to be a bad actor for you.
How do you get access to them? I mean, for example, if you wanted Defender or whatever.
Sure. If in the Microsoft world, if you just go, if you go down to the little search bar in the bottom left-hand corner of your computer, there's a little magnifying glass there. And if in that box, if you just start typing security, and you'll actually pull up the Windows Security app, and you can launch that app. And that app is actually based on Defender. So you can set up your preferences there.
Oh, okay. Windows security, device security, security. So that's where you're going. Kitty apparently just pulled all that up. Okay. Security is okay.
Yeah, there you go.
And that just came up from typing security in the search box.
Correct.
Okay.
What about on Macs?
I am not as familiar in the Mac space. I could certainly figure it out and let you know. I have iPads and I have an iPhone,
May 26th, tomorrow.
which generally, if you go to, iOS's security settings, which sometimes you have to dig around a little bit for, they're doing a pretty good job of natively, for an individual, they're doing a pretty good job of natively managing that.
That, just come in and we'll do what we can. We're non-residential.
Great. What other questions does anyone have about staying safe online? Any scary experiences?
I keep getting an email that's saying that thank you for applying for a loan. You'll know your answer in a couple days. About 3 weeks ago, I would get like 20 a day, and I kept deleting or trashing. So now I'm down to maybe 3 a day. So I don't know, how does that happen? Like, am I being,
So it can,
I mean, it's just weird that because I have not ever applied for a loan and I wouldn't do it on email or things. So it's just, I get these weird emails.
yeah, those are phishing attempts. And so they're hoping that you're going to click the buttons and, you know, and respond to them. And, you know, sometimes even clicking unsubscribe is not a good idea because you identify that as a live email address, you know,
Okay.
to somebody who's behaving badly. So mostly the best thing to do is to delete them. If they're always coming from the same source, you can block that address is one of the choices when you go to delete. You can make Windows or Apple, you know, block them from ever seeing them again. So that is an option that might be helpful there. Or you can, you know, delete them. There are also a couple of, you know, like sort of the do not call list. I don't know if you're familiar with those. There are a couple of organizations like out there that you can put your name and your phone number and your email address on a kind of do not call list. And that's supposed to help kind of cut down on email spam and texting spam and things like that.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. And I know for myself, there are some local elections where I live, and I've been getting a lot of unsolicited text messages about candidates. And they do actually include the option to stop, you know, the messages from coming. And so I do that. You know, when I get one of those, I'll text back whatever it says to stop doing that. But you know, again, some of these things are really effective. And so that's why you keep getting a lot of them, you know, in terms of emails about loan scams or phone calls about that sort of thing. It's, you know, unfortunately, they're actually, there it is. Thanks, Kitty. You're the best. Yes, this is it, the National Do Not Call Registry. So you can sign up for this, and it actually puts you on a list for 5 years where people are supposed to stop calling you. So this is a good thing. This is definitely a good thing to do.
All right, well,
Do not,
thanks.
You can also do this.
call.gov. Yep.
Yeah, you can also do this for physical mail. You know, for a lot of the junk mail that you might get, there's another list that you can sign up for that really did a good job of cutting down on physical mail that I was receiving. I can't think of the name of it, but Kitty might figure it out here in a second.
Maybe you can put it down in that little that little micro or box in the search box.
Yeah, we can. We will. I think we're gonna post the presentation at some point, and in the presentation are some notes that I put with the slides. So what I talked about here today is actually you can have access to that information again.
Oh.
Sorry, I was trying to share the do not mail
okay.
list. So directmail.com is gives
Yeah,
you the
DMA choice,
opt-out
DMAchoice.org.
capability.
Yeah.
Directmail.com.
DMAchoice.org is the Direct Mail Association.
Yeah,
It
actually,
has
this
the
is a
email
great
opt-out.
This is a great screen, Kitty, because this gives you all of them. You see the Do Not Call Registry is there at the bottom. So you can sign yourself up for these things, and that'll help, you know, maybe thin out a little of the noise from your both physical and electronic lives.
Yeah, that would be good.
Well, and I love that you can do both your cell phone and if you still have a home phone. Sometimes it doesn't work so great on our business line, but you know, hey, every little bit helps. And I think that I know for myself, my cell phone gives me the opportunity to mark even text messages and phone as spam so that it doesn't, it at least gets hidden from me. So I'm not tempted to click on it.
Sometimes it is really tempting.
Well, or you get in a
It's human
hurry and you
nature
just
that-
forget, it's,
right.
Yeah, sure.
Or they disguise it cleverly enough that you think you should click on it and look at it and then go,
Mhm.
nah, that's
Yeah. That's why that
Yeah.
hovering is so important. It's more important to hover than click.
Yes, cover.
Hover, your finger.
I think I must be about that before I was able to connect.
Yeah, so great.
I'm like back in the back. But I suggest just
Any other questions for Jen while we have her? All right. Well, ladies, thank you so much for joining us this evening. And we'll get this emailed out to you, the presentation, so that you can review the slide deck again and some of Jen's notes that she included.
And thank you
And
so
we'll-
much for including us in the ability to join you all. I'm
Oh, well, we
very
love having you.
impressed. I'm very impressed with your wonderful new club, and all of your presentations that I've been able to attend have been spectacular. So
Well,
Thank
thank
you.
you so much. Appreciate it.
Kitty. And
And
thank you,
Jen?
Jennifer, so much for your time and talent.
Thank you,
Thank
guys.
you.
But
Have a great night.
thanks, everybody.
You too.